Zipper rolls out to the right, pitches off to Taylor, and Taylor's to the 20, down to the 15, down to the 10, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Touchdown, Billy Taylor! Touchdown, Billy Taylor! Billy Taylor scored a touchdown from 21 yards out. The crowd goes berserk. It was November 22nd, 1969. That they came to Barry, Michigan, all dressed in maize and blue. The words were said, the prayers were read, and everybody cried. But when they closed the coffin, there was someone else inside. Oh, they came to Barry, Michigan, but Michigan wasn't dead. And when the game was over, it was someone else instead. 11 Michigan Wolverines put on the gloves of gray, and as the organ played the victors, they laid Woody Hayes away. Under center is Wangler at the 45. He goes back. He's looking for a receiver. He throws downfield to Carter. Who's got it better than us? Nobody!
Welcome to the Michigan Man Podcast on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V Sporto Network, and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew, for Wolverine fans from coast to coast. Go Blue and welcome to the show. I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. Let's get it started today with my view from Section 17. When I got to the Big House last week, I was expecting to see a tough, hard-fought game with BYU. I had seen parts of the Cougars' first two games and then the entire UCLA game, and I was impressed. I never thought we could manhandle them in the way that we did. I'm still not sure what it means in the long term for this season, but for the fourth week in a row, we saw improvement in just about every facet of this team's play. Now it's time to get the Big Ten season started with a road trip to Maryland in a game that will be broadcast coast to coast on BTN, and we'll have more on that for you later. Today we're going to recap the BYU game and then get ready for Saturday night. Joining me on our Michigan Game Day segment will be beat writer Mark Snyder from the Detroit Free Press. Last week, due to technical reasons, I released the show in two parts. We published the Game Day edition on Tuesday and then our visitors segment on Thursday. Skype was down worldwide for most of the day on Monday, so I had to scramble in getting my guests recorded in time to publish last week, as many of you remember. In the end, we delivered two separate shows, and the feedback from you, the listeners, really took me by surprise. The majority of you seem to enjoy having two shorter programs released, so I'm going to do it that way the rest of the season. If you have any feedback about the change, I'd enjoy hearing from you as always. Sometimes it's good to try something different, especially when you, the listeners, responded in such a big and positive way to the change. So today it's our Michigan Game Day segment with Mark Snyder, and then on Thursday we'll bring you the Visitors Edition. My guest will be Radio Hall of Famer and longtime radio play-by-play voice of Maryland football and basketball, Johnny Holliday, so make sure you join us for that. Before the season started, Mark Snyder thought Michigan would be 3-1 heading into Big Ten play, so he was right on. He also didn't expect to see a beatdown against BYU on Saturday, but that hasn't changed his mind on where he thinks Michigan will end up this season. Football beat writer Mark Snyder from the Detroit Free Press is up next here on The Michigan Man on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V Sporto Network, and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew. With us on our Michigan Game Day segment this week is beat writer Mark Snyder from the Detroit Free Press. Good to have you back, Mark.
I'm doing great. How are you?
Well, doing well, especially after what we witnessed on Saturday in the Big House. I think we all expected improvement on Saturday, Mark, against BYU. It's been that way from week to week so far this year, but I never expected the dominating type performance like we saw Saturday. What about you?
No, I don't think so, especially against BYU. I think there was a lot of understanding or expectation, at least, that BYU was a physical team, a team that was going to give Michigan a match, and if Michigan won, it was going to be a close game. Nothing like the whitewashing that they gave.
We expected the Michigan defense this year was going to be good, and there's a lot of football to be played yet against a lot of very tough opponents. But you really can't say enough good things right now about the level of play we're seeing from this defense, Mark, can you?
Not at all. I think it's amazing. I mean, really, because we came into the season, I think everyone thought, okay, the linebackers are going to be great. They're veterans, they're experienced, and everything. The secondary had been solid last year for the most part, but the defensive line lost its two defensive ends. Well, the defensive line has been the best part. The secondary has probably been right there with them. And the linebackers, I mean, not that the linebackers spend a lot of time on the field, but they really have been the part of this defense that's been not too impactful. So it's really an interesting dynamic how things change.
I know. When you looked at the stats line after the game Saturday, you saw that the linebackers had really only a handful of tackles because the D-line was so dominating. Again, looking at that defensive line, Mark, there doesn't appear to be a weak link in that very deep rotation that we're running up front.
Yeah, that's interesting. I was looking at it over the weekend, and it was looks like there were 8 players who have been involved in a tackle for loss of some kind, half tackle or something like that. And it shows they're all getting pressure, and that makes it very difficult on the quarterback and the offensive line because you can't scheme against one great defensive end and try to double them or cheat to his side or something like that because they're coming from everywhere. And then when there's 2 or 3 of them back there, the quarterback has nowhere to go. And you saw in some of those plays, Mangum just from BYU, he just had nowhere to go. He didn't know what to do with the ball.
When the corners were playing press coverage, which they played most of the day on Saturday, even after the game, BYU receivers said they were surprised how disciplined the coverage was. So even when Mangum had time back there were very few openings, Mark.
It was a unique game. You'd think it was a unique game, but maybe it's not. Maybe this is just what they're doing and they're buying in. I think a lot of this credit on the defense should go to DJ Durkin. Michigan has been a good defense, but discipline was part of the issues from the last couple of years. And I think he's taking care of that. They're staying with it. They're trusting what he's telling them instead of just thinking that they know more than he does.
Well, the offense continues to be a work in progress, which we also have expected, but we did see that progress on Saturday. What did you think of Jake Rudock's play, Mark?
I thought Jake Rudock's play was pretty solid. I mean, he still had a couple of throws that were errant and, could have been picked off. They weren't. But no turnovers is no turnovers. And I think at this point in Rudock's season, that's a major leap forward. And you saw it. When you don't turn the ball over, you can be efficient. And he didn't need to be dominant. I mean, he, didn't throw for 200 yards. But he had a longer pass. They hadn't had a 28-yard pass all year, longer than 28 all year. And then he had Jake Butt on that 41-yarder. He executed those fakes, which is very difficult. The one to Khalid Hill down the middle. I think there are things that Rudock did, and he showed his feet. I think he understood he could tuck the ball and he could run. There were those openings for the 2 touchdowns. And he carried the ball a couple other times as well. Those are the things that a veteran quarterback will do, and those are the things. That's the reason that he was so important, for him to come here and for them to have him and have someone with experience. Because in those situations, they can adjust. He may not have the strongest arm. He's not going to necessarily make some of the throws other guys can, but that's not necessary, especially in college level.
I thought it was interesting after the game that several of the BYU defensive players said him running completely took them by surprise. They did not expect that.
Yeah, I don't know that it was a game plan decision. I think that, Jake just saw the moment, and I think that's how he is, It's how he is with the receivers, because Michigan's obviously spread the ball around to 17 different players, and really he doesn't zero in on everyone, which is not going to help anyone's numbers necessarily, but what it's going to do is it keeps the defense off balance, and it's a prescription for winning. A lot of quarterbacks don't trust that. They have the guy or 2 on the team who they trust, and they're going to keep feeding them no matter what. And Rudock is proving that that's not necessarily the best way.
The whipping boys the last few years have been that offensive line, no doubt about it. We thought they struggled against Utah, but every week they've gotten better, and that was a very solid performance from that unit on Saturday.
Yeah, I think it's solid. I think Rudock is having time, and I think that's really a big part of it. I know that everyone looks at the running lanes and stuff. And I think that, the running game is solid, and I think they're giving them opportunity. Now, these are gaping holes necessarily at this point, but I think there's enough for them to make some yardage, and De'Veon Smith really runs up on them pretty good. I think he's starting to learn about the offensive linemen and kind of where their blocks are supposed to be, and that's helping him as a runner. In terms of what they're doing, aside from that, the pass blocking is enough. They're protecting Rudock enough, and that's what they got to do. Just don't get overwhelmed, and it's enough.
The pass protection was there, other than the 2 sacks, which I know the offensive line said they were really upset about after the game.
Right.
Last week Jehu Chesson said timing was still an issue between Rudock and the receivers. I know some fans might question that, but it really does, Mark, take time for these guys to get on the same page, doesn't it?
I think it does, too, and especially like I talked about, he's in the ball around. Well, the timing will come when you're working with the same guy every time, and he's not doing that. And I think that's part of the reason that the timing is taking longer. But they're doing enough, and I think that, they so far, these last 3 games, it's hard to question, and say, well, look, he needs to be throwing for 270 yards, because he doesn't. So that hasn't been necessary yet. And when it becomes necessary, I think then you can complain. But for now, you look at his 194 yards, 14 to 25, probably could be a little higher percentage there, but he's doing what he needs to do.
Well, a couple of plays that had everyone talking after the game were Amara Darbo's catch in the first quarter, and of course De'Veon Smith's unbelievable run in the first half. Those were both just incredible individual efforts, weren't they, Mark?
Yeah, the Darbo one really caught me. I think because, sometimes on balls like that, guys can't even get to them, let alone catch them. And he said that he saw it was going outside, so he adjusted, and he figured he'd go at it. Whereas a lot of times guys will just say, well, that's over my head and I don't have a chance. And that's how these great plays happen a lot of times, because the receiver will take a chance on a ball that he wouldn't normally do that. And I think that him sticking his hand up and corralling the ball and then controlling it on the way down was just remarkable. It was remarkable. You don't see those things very often. And Dan Dierdorf on the broadcast, he said it's one of the great catches in Michigan football history. There have been a couple of great ones. I think people remember Marquise Walker making one in, I think it was 2001. That was pretty unique. So there have been some other ones as well. But yeah, it's definitely a dominant play. In terms of Smith, Harbaugh pointed to the effort, and I think that's the biggest change maybe with this coaching staff and these running backs. Offensive line is better, but I think that the effort, don't give up on the play, don't go down easily, earn it. And I think that that's going to be a play, as I tweeted this right afterwards, that's going to be a play that Harbaugh is going to show, and Tyrone Wheatley probably too, is going to show on film for years, because he went into this scrum, and that's when you go down, and you just accept it. But he was falling down, he put his hand down, he still emerged. So there's always a crease, there's always an opportunity. And then as the defensive back closed in on him, Smith knew that he had the weight advantage, and he could throw that guy off. And that's from going through that play and having the determination, and as Harbaugh kept counting, 4th, 5th, 6th effort, and because you won't go down. And that's kind of the unique, and that's the philosophy. It's kind of the team philosophy, but especially the running back's philosophy that he wants to instill, and Smith's brought in the most, and that's why he's playing the most.
Yeah, absolutely, and he is just running so very hard. I know we talk about his vision at times, missing some holes, but there's no question he is the number one guy in that backfield right now, Mark.
Yeah, I think so, and I think that, some people maybe questioned it, including me, after the UNLV game when Isaac had a big day and De'Veon really struggled. But I think it's different styles and different schemes, and I think Smith came back, and the fact that he was supportive of Isaac and that type of thing, and they know, I think it was made clear to them very early. De'Veon may be the starter, but this is a committee deal. Everyone's going to get carries, and if you prove something with your carries, you're going to get more of them. And I think that De'Veon realized that, and he came back, and he had a strong game.
And I think what we have to like is that committee of backs, Ty Isaac, Derek Green, and Drake Johnson, who are playing with De'Veon Smith, are all giving great effort, and I think they're improving from week to week, too.
Yeah, it was interesting. I think one of the most interesting things of the game was Derek Green, who has basically been garbage time running back for most of this season, was used in short yardage. Some of that maybe because of, and that was even before Smith's injury, but I think even afterwards especially. But they used him in the short yardage. They gave him some confidence. They said, we're going to use you. There's a role for you here. You're not just the end-of-game guy. And I think that keeps all those guys fighting and hungry. You don't want to lose them. mentally, and that's one way to do it, is to give them each a different role at a different time.
Well, with us on our Michigan Game Day segment this week is Michigan beat writer Mark Snyder from the Detroit Free Press. Mark, this Saturday, the Wolverines head down to Maryland for a night game, BTN game, 8 o'clock kickoff, to play a team that has plenty of their own issues right now, don't they?
Oh, yeah, they're definitely, I'd say, worse than what they saw with BYU. Even BYU may have been tired, but Maryland's just bad. I think that, they switched quarterbacks a couple weeks ago, went to this Caleb Rowe, and then in the middle of this game, after he threw 4 interceptions, they had to pull him against West Virginia. And the other guy came in and he threw an interception. The offense is anemic. The defense is getting mauled. I mean, they have nothing really going for them outside of this running back who had a 55-yard run this weekend, but, that's in a 45-6 loss or whatever it is. That's kind of overlooked, I guess, and rightly so. I'm sure they'll load up against him and they'll dare the quarterback to throw this, but who knows even who the quarterback is going to be? It doesn't even matter because Maryland really is overwhelmed. And that's ideal for Michigan, to go on the road really for the first time since Utah, to play at night. That could be an adverse situation if you were going somewhere else. But in this situation, I think it's going to work out. It's going to give Michigan some confidence going into that brutal stretch of Northwestern and then Michigan State.
And they need the confidence because I don't know that it even matters to the guys in this year's team, but we know that for the last 7 years, Michigan has not been a good road team. Yes, things have changed with Coach Harbaugh at the helm, but you've got to think if Michigan wants to continue their upward trend, a strong performance in Maryland is still very important.
Definitely. And if you look at the 49ers, I don't want to reference the 49ers too much, but if you look at what Harbaugh did with the 49ers, it was very impressive on the road. I saw some stat, something like that. They went east, and that's when NFL teams always lose. It's very tough to switch time zones and play early games. Harbaugh's teams were like 9-1 or something like that, going east with the 49ers. So he shows he can keep that consistency between the home and away, and the ability for guys to focus and understand that even though the game's at a different venue, maybe at a different time, it's still the same game, and that's a unique trait of a coach.
Well, after Saturday's game, Mark, BYU coach Bronco Mendenhall and quite a few of his players said Michigan was the best team they played so far, easily the most physical. I think it's evident after just 4 games this team is getting tougher physically and mentally each week, Mark.
Yeah, definitely, and that's what you want to see. And I think Michigan fans, that a lot of them are buying in, but some of them are still saying, we've seen this. Rich Rodriguez, we saw, great Septembers. Even Brady Hoke, we had a couple great Septembers. But this has a different feel, I think, because they're trending up. It's not like a one big game where it's on one big Denard Robinson type player, or they just have a flashpoint like they did, with the Notre Dame game in 2013. This is a trend, and I think it's moving in a direction. And I think that's the most important part of this. And what we've learned is, as you said, that they're rooted in these principles that aren't going to fade. It's strong defense up front on the line, strong offensive line, and being physical. And then the other things, may come and go in terms of skill position, give week to week, but those are the things that you can build on and move forward.
Well, a final question for you, Mark. Before the season, most of us pegged this Michigan team at 8-4, maybe even 7-5. That's sort of where I was falling before the season. Have you changed your preseason projections on just how many games you think this team can win?
I'm not going to change it yet. I said 7 wins. I can see 8 wins at this point, but I think we still need to see them win against an elite team. And I think we thought that BYU might be that, but obviously BYU, even if they were that, they weren't, themselves after a third road game against all these great teams and stuff. I think if they prove something against Northwestern, if they handle Northwestern, significantly, well, then I think it's time to buy in, and maybe you can adjust some things. But this is kind of how everyone, at least I predicted it so far. I predicted a loss to Utah, and then another day I was wrong because I changed my prediction in the BYU game. But, before the season, I think people thought, those Ohio State, Michigan State, those are still the class of the country, if not the Big Ten. So that's 2 losses, and I think, maybe Penn State is in a different vein, but we haven't seen Michigan win on the road yet.
Our guest here on our Michigan Game Day segment this week has been Michigan beat writer Mark Snyder from the Detroit Free Press. Mark, always a pleasure. We'll get you back here as the season progresses.
Thank you very much.
An injury update and the latest news is next on Wolverine Quick Hits, here on The Michigan Man, on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V-Sporto Network, and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew. On Wolverine Quick Hits today, at his presser on Monday, Coach Harbaugh said Davion Smith is day-to-day and he is sore. Harbaugh said x-rays on Smith's ankle were negative, but he didn't go into detail regarding the injury. Ben Braden left the game on Saturday with a deep thigh bruise and could have gone back in if needed. He's good to go for Saturday night. Joe Carriage is day-to-day, as is freshman receiver Brian Cole. There are a few other players dinged up, but all in all, we are in good shape heading into Week 5. Coach Harbaugh said if Davion Smith cannot play on Saturday, he is confident the other backs will give strong performances. He said all of his backs are running hard and they want the ball. Michigan is ranked 22nd in the AP poll this week, but did not get enough votes to show up in the USA Today coaches poll. We open the week as 11.5-point favorites against Maryland on the road Saturday night. We also enter Week 5 with the number 2 ranked defense in college football. Coordinator DJ Durkin says that's nice, but we can and will get better. On Coach Harbaugh's Monday night radio show, he said you can't do better than a shutout from a team perspective, but there are individual improvements that can, and he believes, will be made. At his Monday presser, Coach Harbaugh said he enjoys coaching this team. He said they come to practice every day, work hard, and enjoy each other's company. He said they want to get better every day, which is exactly what he expects will happen. A reminder that we'll be back on Thursday with our Visitors Edition to Scout Maryland. My guest will be Radio Hall of Famer and longtime radio play-by-play voice of Maryland football and basketball, Johnny Holliday. So make sure you join us for that. If you get the show from iTunes, take a minute to rate or review the show. Our show apps are available for free from the iTunes Store, Google Play Store, and the Windows 8 App Store. We are also on the roster at Wolverine Sports Radio, which is also available from iTunes and the Google Play Store. Follow us on Twitter at The Michigan Man and like us on Facebook at The Michigan Man Podcast. You can also follow Wolverine Sports Radio on Twitter at Go Blue Radio. That will do it for the Michigan Game Day edition of the show. We'll see you back here on Thursday with Maryland's legendary radio voice, Johnny Holliday. Until then, have a great Wolverine week, everyone. I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. Take care, and as always, go blue. Thanks for joining us today on The Michigan Man, here on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V-Sporto Network, and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew. Our listener lines are open 24/7 for your calls at 313-263-4842. That's 313-263-4842. Or email us at themichiganmanpodcast@yahoo.com. That's themichiganmanpodcast@yahoo.com. The Michigan Man Podcast is produced at the studios of Robin Lynn Productions, Allen Park, Michigan, and is not affiliated with the University of Michigan. Go Blue!